Knowing that manual console testers are quite limited for us to perform regression testing, we will now move on to the more ideal solution, which is about automated unit testing using JUnit's assertions. You have already seen many examples about JUnit testing and assertions back in your review tutorial series part 1 and part 2. So I'm just going to review some of them, and also we will focus more later about how we can test for expected exceptions or unexpected exceptions. So that's something you haven't seen before. I would like to spend more time on that. Okay, let's now go over some points. So why are we using JUnits? It's because we can automate the testing of your Java classes. So the idea would be you only have to do the manual work of designing the test methods one by one into the JUnit test class. Once you have developed all the test methods, you shouldn't really touch them anymore. And then every time, if there's any change introduced into your Java class under test, you will just have to rerun all the JUnit test cases automatically. No more manual work is needed, only in the beginning design stage when you try to implement all your test methods. So once you derive the list of test cases, translate it into a JUnit test case and like a test method, and just into the Java class. And remember, for every class you want to test, you want to create a separate corresponding JUnit test class. Okay, there are helpful callers or clients basically in your in every one of your JUnit test method. They are more like a caller, in which case you just declare the type of the class being the callee and then call the relevant methods and get their return values and compare them against the expected value, right? That's what we said before in the review tutorial series. And so what kind of scenarios can you test? Number one, you may try to use a method in a legal way, satisfying its precondition. For example, you may try to use the increment method in a legal way when the current value for the counters is either 0, 1, or 2. But when you try to call the increment method when the current counter value is actually 3, that would be considered as illegal way, right? Because in that case, some value too large exception will be expected to be thrown. Okay, so now if you try to use the method in a legal way, it's going to be success. That's something you would expect to see. It will be success if the result is as expected. For example, in that case, if an exception is thrown unexpectedly, that would be considered as a failure, right? So the failure would be if the result is not as expected, either maybe because the return value is invalid, or maybe because some unexpected exception was thrown prematurely. Okay. Well, the other way to test your user scenario would be you try to use the method in an illegal way, right? That's basically what console tester 1 and console tester 2 were actually trying to achieve. So let's say if I'm trying to use a decrement method when the counter was only initially initialized. In that case, I'm trying to decrement from 0 to -1. That would be illegal. In that case, what will be considered as a success? It will be considered as a success if the expected exception, for example, value too small exception occurs. Otherwise, it will be considered as a failure if it did not occur. We actually tested all of these already, right? Especially this attempt over here. But for this one here, you have seen also a lot of examples when you were doing the review tutorial series part 1 and part 2. Right? This slide here is really important about summarizing the concept you have seen so far. All right. How do you use the JUnit test testing framework? Not just for Eclipse, any IDE that will support Java programming, they should also support by default the JUnit testing framework. For example, let's say IntelliJ, or if you use Android Studio to develop some mobile apps, they also support JUnit testing framework by default. Right? It's not specific to Eclipse. But let's talk about Eclipse specifically for this course. You just create projects, and for the separation of concern, we got to create different packages, right? So here I'm just using one example where we got tests or also implementation. Of course, in your tutorial, it's JUnit tests and also model. It's okay as long as we are following the separation of concern about arranging classes in different purposes into different packages. Then we are really satisfying the separation of concern. Okay. All right, and then that's how you create a new JUnit test case. Just to remind you visually, that's how you create a JUnit test case, and then create one JUnit test case to test one Java class only. So, for example, if you want to test for counter and also products, you shouldn't really try to test them into a single one. Of course, the exception will be your laboratory exercises, where for convenience, I put all the starter tests into a single test class. But for your developments, either for maybe for this course, for some extra exercises, or if you want to go beyond this course, you should only dedicate one JUnit test class to a single class to be tested, right? That's something I want to clarify as well. Okay, if you have n Java classes to test, you're gonna create n JUnit test cases, right? JUnit test classes. Okay, and we use JUnit 4 for this course, and then you're gonna add it to the build path, but you will usually be prompted for you to add by Eclipse. And this is always the default test case that will be generated for you. And we tried before in the review tutorial series. You can try it again yourself. If you run it directly, it's gonna fail. You're gonna get a red bar, right? Let's go over some principle, and then I'll show you. I'll give you some little quiz. Line number 6 to 8, basically this part here about the public void test, fail not yet implemented, and the closing brackets. So this is just an ordinary mutated method in the JUnit test class. However, in order for this method to be executed as a JUnit test case, you must precede it with the add test tag. It'll be very important. Hypothetically, if you simply get rid of line number 5 over here, you can try it out on Eclipse. If you got rid of line number 5, then if you try to execute the test counter as a JUnit test case, you will get no test cases over there to be executed, because every test case must be preceded by the add test tag. Okay, we also discussed that in the Q&A session earlier, so you can also refer to it. Okay, line number 5 is crucial for the tag, otherwise you wouldn't be treated as a JUnit test. And okay, that's exactly what I meant, what I said earlier. Okay, and by default, we deliberately fail the test with a message not yet implemented over here. Okay, once you, of course, once you get a default test case, you can already execute it by running that as JUnit test. Okay, and this is what you will get, just a red bar. So which means this one, which fell automatically, will actually generate a red bar. Okay, how do we interpret the test report? All the test methods that are prepended or preceded with the test tag will be executed, all of them, right? And then, so this bullet point here is very important for you to know, which summarizes what does it really mean when a test pass or fail. Okay, let's go over that. We say that we got a test failure for a particular JUnit test method. It will fail if either of the following will actually happen. Let's take a look, and I'll give you some example soon. Either because we got some assertion failure, we have seen this a lot in the review tutorial. Either because of the fail, we haven't really used the fail assertion, which I hinted at the end of the review tutorial series, maybe part 2, that we might use that when we test for exceptions. We're gonna see that this time in this module. We'll see that a little bit later. But for other things like other assertion, like assert true, assert equals, assert false, assert same, assert null, and etc. All of them, if any one of them actually fail, the entire test method will be considered as failing. The very first assertion failure is going to cause the whole test method to actually suspend its execution and then report as a failure, right? If you got so many assertions that might fail, only one will be reported at a time, okay? Depending on how early they are put into your test method, okay? And another one here is also, you may have seen that as well. Let's say somehow in your test method, rather than having assertion failure, if there's any unexpected exception, such as these are the most common ones, null pointer exception or array index out of bound exception. Maybe the way you put the test method, put the assertion together by putting the manipulation together, you simply got some null pointer exception or array index out of bound exception. In that case, it will be considered as an unexpected that will also cause the entire test method to actually fail. Okay, so these are the only two possibility to make a test fail. If none of them actually happen, that means it will be considered as a success. Okay, having this in mind, right? Always keep in mind these bullet points about what it means for a test to fail or to pass. Okay. After running all the test methods preceded with a test tag, here is how the report should be will be generated. There will be a green bar if all the test cases actually are succeeded, the success case, meaning that all the assertions pass, and also there's no unexpected exception happening. And you will so what you should do is you shouldn't be too happy about just getting a green bar. It could be that maybe you got very small number of test cases actually created to assess the correctness of your class, which is not very ideal. Or maybe all the test cases you put are of very similar nature, so that they are not really testing different aspects of your software. So you want to really keep challenging yourself if more test cases may be added. That's why for your laboratory exercises, in addition to the test starter tests that we gave to you, you should only try to cover some missing scenario. So this point here is really important. Okay, what about red bar? Red bar definition is very easy. As long as there's at least one test method that actually fail, in which case either because some assertion failure or could be because some unexpected exception, in that case you'll get a red bar. Only if you pass all the test methods defined in your test class will you actually pass and get a green bar. All right. So in that case, if you get a red bar, what you should do is you should really set the breakpoints around the line of the assertion that fell and try to launch the debugger and try to debug it, right? That's what you should do and fix the bug. As soon as you see any red bar in your development, you should really try to fix that one as soon as possible. Don't really procrastinate on that. Otherwise, it can really bite you bite you later. Okay, so here's a question, a little bit simple quiz question. What would be the easiest way to make the default test a success? Let's see. Over here, right? Again, I summarize. I still put the screenshots about the principle of passing or failing a test method over here in the notes. You can keep that handy. But let's look at this default test over here, where we got the fail over here. What would be the easiest way to really have this test rather than giving us a red bar? Well, we want to have a green bar. What's the best way? My hints to you, we only need 2 additional characters. Pause the video and think about it. All right, assuming that you thought about it, what about these 2 characters? Only these 2, which means we're putting this into comments, meaning that it has no effects. And then it would be as if we simply do nothing in this particular test, right? After this, we're simply effectively saying that the test is going to do nothing. When the test case actually do nothing, so that means it's not going to fail either because of an assertion failure or unexpected exception, simply because you do nothing, so nothing can go wrong. So that means you're going to get success. All right, so that's a very simple quiz question, but you should really know why. It does have some good insight for you to learn. Okay, so if you simply do nothing and you're going to get a green bar. Okay, let's now go back over here. Okay, answer, delete the fail. You can either delete a line or just put that 2/ to make it a comments. All right, once you do that, exactly what I just suggested, and then now it simply does nothing, so none of the exceptions or assertion failure will actually occur. All right, and we get a green bar. That's what you will get. However, the test actually passes at the moment is not useful at all. It's completely useless because the test method is supposed to demonstrate some, so this is some principle that's really important for you to know, right? So this one here is useless because number one, there is no meaningful manipulation of objects instantiated from classes in the model package. Right, number one. And number two, I'm going to put it here. Number two, also no assertions. No assertions run to check expected versus actual values. Actual values are usually obtained from calling excessive methods, as we learned earlier. To check expected against actual values, right? So you should really know why this particular trick over here, which will allow you to get a green bar, is not good at all. Okay, for reason 1 and for reason 2 over here. All right, hopefully that makes sense to you. And then, so that's the green bar, which is not very useful.